I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the bright orange garbage truck rumbling down my private road at 6 in the morning for the third day in a row. My name is Trevor Fulton, and I'd owned this 20-acre property in rural Clackamas County, Oregon, for almost 5 years. The land came with a half-mile private gravel road that connected to the main county highway. It was clearly marked with signs at both ends stating, "Private road, no trespassing, property of Trevor Fulton." I'd inherited the land from my uncle, who'd been meticulous about maintaining the boundaries and access rights. The property sat adjacent to a newer development called Pinewood Heights, one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions with identical houses and an HOA that seemed to think it controlled the entire universe. I'd moved out here from Portland specifically to get away from noise, traffic, and people who thought their opinions mattered more than property rights. I worked remotely as a software consultant, which meant I could live anywhere with decent internet. This place had given me peace and quiet for years, until Pinewood Heights started construction 3 years ago. Since then, I'd watched the development grow from empty lots to a fully populated neighborhood of about 200 homes. The HOA there was run by a woman named Brenda Patterson, a 52-year-old retired real estate agent who apparently had nothing better to do than micromanage every aspect of her neighbors' lives. I'd met her once, shortly after the first families moved in. She'd actually driven onto my property uninvited, parked in front of my house, and knocked on my door to inform me that my fence didn't match the aesthetic vision of the community. I'd politely reminded her that my property wasn't part of her community and asked her to leave. She hadn't taken it well. Now, watching this garbage truck barrel down my road, kicking up clouds of dust and gravel, I felt my jaw tighten. I grabbed my phone and took a video as the truck continued past my house toward the Pinewood Heights entrance. The truck was clearly labeled Summit Waste Management serving Pinewood Heights HOA. I threw on some jeans and boots and walked down to where my road connected to the county highway. Sure enough, instead of using the main entrance to Pinewood Heights, which was a perfectly good paved road about a quarter-mile south, the truck was cutting through my property. It saved them maybe 2 minutes of driving time, but it was my road, my private road that I maintained, repaired, and paid property taxes on. I called the number on the side of the truck. A bored-sounding dispatcher answered on the 4th ring. "Summit Waste Management, how can I help you?" "This is Trevor Fulton. Your truck is using my private road without permission. I need you to stop immediately and use the proper entrance to Pinewood Heights." "Sir, I'm not sure what you mean. Our drivers follow the routes provided by the HOA." "I don't care what route the HOA provided. The road your truck is using is my private property. It's clearly marked. Your drivers are trespassing." There was a pause. "I'll make a note of it and pass it along to the route manager." "I need more than a note. I need confirmation that your trucks will stop using my road." "I'll pass along your concern, sir. Is there anything else?" I hung up, frustrated. I'd worked in customer service enough to recognize a brush-off when I heard one. The next morning, the same truck came through at the same time. And the morning after that. By the end of the week, I'd called Summit Waste Management 4 more times, each time getting the same runaround. I sent emails. I got generic responses thanking me for my feedback. I decided to escalate. I drafted a formal cease and desist letter, printed it out, and drove to the Summit Waste Management office in Oregon City. The office was a dingy trailer next to a large lot full of garbage trucks. A woman at the front desk took my letter with barely a glance. "I'll make sure management sees this," she said, already turning back to her computer. "I need to speak with someone in charge." "Everyone's out on routes right now. You can leave your information and someone will call you back." No one called me back. The trucks kept coming, every single morning, Monday through Friday, like clockwork. I started documenting everything. I set up a trail camera near the entrance to my road and captured clear footage of the trucks entering and exiting. I photographed the damage they were causing to my gravel road, the deep ruts forming in the soft shoulders, the way they scattered gravel that I'd have to rake and redistribute. After 2 weeks of this, I drove over to the Pinewood Heights HOA office, which was located in a small building near the development's main entrance. Inside, a young woman sat at a desk surrounded by filing cabinets. "I need to speak with Brenda Patterson," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but this is urgent. Your garbage trucks are trespassing on my property daily." The woman looked uncertain. "Mrs. Patterson is in a meeting right now. Can I take a message?" "I'll wait." I sat down in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs and pulled out my phone. 20 minutes later, a door opened and Brenda Patterson emerged, followed by two other women I didn't recognize. Brenda spotted me and her expression soured immediately. "Mr. Fulton, what are you doing here?" "Your garbage service is using my private road every day. I need it to stop." Brenda crossed her arms. "The route was established by Summit Waste Management. We don't control where they drive. You contracted with them. You're responsible for ensuring they're not trespassing. Your road connects to the county highway. It's a public throughway." I felt heat rising in my chest. "It's a private road. It's clearly marked. I have documentation proving ownership and private status. Your trucks are damaging my property and trespassing daily." "I think you're being dramatic. It's just a truck driving past your house." "It's not just driving past. It's using my private road to access your development, causing damage, and doing so without permission or compensation." Brenda's face hardened. "Well, Mr. Fulton, perhaps if you were part of our community, you'd understand the importance of cooperation and good neighborliness. As it stands, I don't see any issue with the current arrangement." "Then you're going to see a legal issue. I'm formally notifying you that continued use of my private road without permission constitutes trespassing. I want it stopped immediately." Brenda waved her hand dismissively. "Do what you need to do. We have lawyers, too." I left the HOA office angrier than I'd been in years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brenda's smug expression, the way she dismissed my legitimate concerns like I was some kind of troublemaker. I'd tried to handle this reasonably. I'd made phone calls, sent letters, met face-to-face. Nothing had worked. Around 2 in the morning, I remembered something my uncle used to say. "If someone's using your resources without permission, invoice them like you would any other customer." He'd been a small business owner, practical, and no nonsense. The idea seemed perfect. I spent the next day researching. I looked up what private road owners could legally charge for unauthorized use. I found case law from Oregon and other states supporting the right of private road owners to charge reasonable fees for access. I discovered that commercial vehicles typically paid much higher rates because of the damage they caused. I calculated the cost of maintaining my road, factoring in gravel, grading, time, and equipment. I researched what logging companies and other commercial operations paid to use private roads in rural Oregon. By the end of the day, I'd established a rate. $75 per trip for commercial vehicles over 10,000 pounds. The garbage truck clearly qualified. It was a reasonable rate, actually on the lower end of what I could legally charge. I drafted an invoice template. Then, I went back through all my trail camera footage and photos. I counted every single time the Summit Waste Management truck had used my road. They came once per day, 5 days per week. They'd been doing this for exactly 3 weeks so far, which meant 15 trips. I created the first invoice, 15 trips at $75 each, totaling $1,125. I included photos from my trail camera showing the truck on my property, copies of my property deed highlighting the private road designation, and a detailed explanation of the charges. I mailed copies to both Summit Waste Management and the Pinewood Heights HOA. The trucks kept coming. Every day, I documented them. Every week, I sent a new invoice. After the first month, I'd sent 4 invoices totaling $4,500. I received no response from either Summit or the HOA. I sent a certified letter informing both parties that continued use of my road after receiving formal notice, and invoices constituted willful trespassing and acknowledgement of the fees. I consulted with a property attorney in Portland, a sharp woman named Rebecca Cho. I showed her everything. My documentation, my invoices, my correspondence. "This is solid," she said, spreading the documents across her desk. "You've established a clear pattern of commercial trespass, you've provided formal notice, you've set reasonable rates, and you've documented everything meticulously. The longer they continue without responding, the stronger your case becomes. Should I put up a gate?" "You could, but it might be better to let this continue. Every additional trip is more money they owe you. Eventually, they'll have to respond, and by then, the amount will be substantial enough that you'll have real leverage." I took her advice. The trucks kept coming, and I kept invoicing. I sent invoices monthly, always via certified mail to create a paper trail. After 3 months, the total reached $13,500. After 6 months, $27,000. The invoices grew into a thick file in my home office. I continued reaching out to Summit Waste Management every few weeks, calling their office, sending emails, requesting meetings. I always got the same runaround. I also sent periodic letters to the HOA, which went completely unanswered. Around the 8-month mark, something changed. I received a letter from a law firm in Portland representing the Pinewood Heights HOA. The letter claimed that my road had established itself as a de facto public easement through continuous use, and that my invoices were baseless and harassing. I forwarded the letter to Rebecca. She called me the same afternoon, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. This is actually good news. It means they're worried. Their legal argument is weak. Oregon law is very clear that private roads don't become public through use, especially not in less than a year. Keep documenting, keep invoicing, don't respond directly to their lawyer. Let me handle any communication. Rebecca sent a response letter that was a masterpiece of legal writing. She systematically demolished every argument the HOA's lawyer had made, cited relevant case law, and included a detailed accounting of all unpaid invoices to date. She also informed them that if payment wasn't received within 30 days, we would be filing a lawsuit for trespass and unjust enrichment. The 30 days passed. No payment came. We filed the lawsuit. The legal process moved slowly, as legal processes do. Discovery took months. The HOA's lawyers tried every delay tactic imaginable. They argued that I hadn't properly posted my road as private, despite the clear signage. They claimed the signs were ambiguous. They tried to argue that because my road intersected with the county highway, it was subject to public access. They attempted to claim that Summit Waste Management was an independent contractor, and the HOA bore no responsibility for the truck's route. Rebecca countered everything methodically. She submitted photos of my signage showing clear, unambiguous language. She provided documentation from the county confirming the private status of my road. She presented the contract between the HOA and Summit Waste Management, which showed that the HOA had specifically designated access routes for trash collection. She demonstrated that the HOA had actual knowledge of the trespass through my multiple letters and visits. Meanwhile, the trucks never stopped coming. Every single weekday morning, there they were. I kept documenting. I kept invoicing. The amount owed continued to climb. I also filed a separate lawsuit against Summit Waste Management. Their defense was even weaker than the HOA's. They tried to claim they were just following the route the HOA provided, but Rebecca presented evidence that Summit had received my cease and desist letters directly, multiple times. They'd had independent knowledge of the trespass and had chosen to continue anyway. Around the 1-year mark, I calculated the total. Approximately 240 trips at $75 each, plus late fees that I'd included in my terms, brought the total to just over $22,000. But I wasn't stopping. The lawsuit was filed, and every additional day of trespass only strengthened my case. The case against Summit Waste Management settled first, about 14 months after the trucks first started using my road. They agreed to pay $35,000, covering all invoiced amounts plus interest, legal fees, and compensation for road damage. More importantly, they agreed to immediately cease using my road and to formally acknowledge in writing that my road was private property. The morning after the settlement was finalized, the garbage truck's route changed. Instead of rumbling down my road at 6 in the morning, it went silent. I actually missed it for a moment just because it had become such a predictable annoyance. Then I remembered the check that would be arriving and stopped missing it entirely. The HOA case was more complicated. Brenda Patterson was digging in her heels. At her deposition, which I attended, she was combative and dismissive. She insisted that my road should be available for community use, that I was being unreasonable, that the whole situation was my fault for not being a team player. "Did you ever attempt to negotiate with Mr. Fulton for legal access to his road?" Rebecca asked during the deposition. "Why would I negotiate? The road was already being used. Did you consider that using private property without permission might be illegal?" "I considered that Mr. Fulton was being difficult for no reason." "Did you read any of the invoices he sent?" I glanced at them. They were ridiculous. Did you read the cease and desist letters? I don't remember. Did you instruct Summit Waste Management to stop using Mr. Fulton's road after receiving notice that it was private property? Brenda shifted in her seat. That wasn't my responsibility. As president of the HOA, weren't you responsible for ensuring the contractors hired by the HOA operated legally? I assumed they knew what they were doing. Rebecca presented email evidence showing that Brenda had received multiple complaints from Summit Waste Management's road manager about my calls and letters. The emails made it clear that Brenda had specifically instructed Summit to continue using my road despite the complaints, telling them I was just bluffing and wouldn't actually do anything. That was the turning point. Brenda had known about the trespass, had received formal notice, and had actively encouraged its continuation. Under Oregon law, that made the trespass willful, which opened the door to enhanced damages. About 18 months after the trucks first appeared on my road, the HOA's lawyer called Rebecca with a settlement offer. They were willing to pay $45,000 to make the case go away. I wanted to take it to trial. I wanted to see Brenda's face when a jury ruled against her. But Rebecca talked sense into me. "You've already won," she said. "You've been compensated for every single unauthorized use of your road, plus legal fees, plus damages, plus interest. Taking this to trial means more months of stress and uncertainty, and there's always a chance something could go wrong. Take the win." I took the win. The settlement included a formal acknowledgement from the Pinewood Heights HOA that my road was private property, a permanent injunction preventing the HOA or any of its contractors from using my road without written permission, and the $45,000 payment. But the story didn't end there. About 3 months after the settlement, I was working in my home office when I noticed unusual activity on my trail camera feed. I'd kept the camera up just in case. The footage showed Brenda Patterson walking down my road with what looked like surveying equipment. I grabbed my phone and headed outside. By the time I reached her, she was about halfway down my road taking photos and measurements. "What are you doing on my property?" I called out. Brenda turned, startled. "This is a county survey. I'm documenting the road condition." "This is my private property. You're trespassing. Again. I have every right to document public infrastructure. We just settled a lawsuit where your organization acknowledged this is private property. You signed the agreement yourself." Brenda's face flushed. "The settlement was coerced. Our lawyer advised us to pay you to avoid further harassment. Get off my property now, or I'm calling the sheriff." "You can't intimidate me, Mr. Fulton." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "I need to report a trespasser on my property who's refusing to leave." Brenda's eyes widened. "You're really calling the police? You're really still on my property." She gathered her equipment quickly and hurried back toward the county road. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher and followed at a distance, documenting everything on my phone. A Clackamas County Sheriff's deputy arrived about 15 minutes later. I explained the situation, showed him the trail camera footage, and provided copies of the settlement agreement. The deputy went to speak with Brenda, who was waiting in her car near the entrance to Pinewood Heights. They talked for about 10 minutes before the deputy returned to me. "She claims she was just walking on what she thought was a public road," the deputy said. "I've explained that it's private property and she needs to stay off it. If she comes back, call us again and we can pursue criminal trespass charges." "Will this be documented?" "I'm writing up a report. It'll be on file." Brenda didn't come back, but the harassment continued in other ways. I started receiving citations from the county about alleged code violations on my property. Each citation claimed something different: improperly stored equipment, unauthorized structures, fire hazards. None of them were valid. Every single one required me to take time away from work to respond, to take photos, to document that I was in full compliance with all county regulations. After the 5th citation in 2 months, I started digging. I submitted a public records request for all the complaints filed about my property. Every single one had been filed by Brenda Patterson. I contacted the county code enforcement office and spoke with the supervisor. I explained the situation, provided documentation of the settled lawsuit and the pattern of harassment. "Mrs. Patterson has been a frequent complainant on many properties," the supervisor admitted. "We take all complaints seriously, but I can see how this might be excessive in your case." Excessive is an understatement. She's weaponizing your department to harass me. I'll make a note in your file. If future complaints come in about your property, we'll do a preliminary assessment before sending someone out. The citations stopped after that, but I knew Brenda wasn't done. People like her never were. Sure enough, about 2 months later, I received notice that the Pinewood Heights HOA was applying for a variance to extend their development onto an adjacent parcel of land. The proposed plan showed a new road that would run directly alongside my property line, close enough that construction would absolutely impact my land. I attended the county planning meeting. Brenda was there, presenting the HOA's proposal with charts and diagrams. She talked about community growth, property values, and responsible development. She never once mentioned the lawsuits or the established pattern of disregarding property rights. When it came time for public comment, I stood up. My name is Trevor Fulton, and my property shares a border with Pinewood Heights. I want the Planning Commission to know that this HOA has a documented history of disregarding private property rights. I've had to sue them successfully for repeated trespassing. Since the lawsuit, the HOA president has continued to harass me through false code enforcement complaints and trespassing on my land. I have serious concerns about any expansion that would bring this organization closer to my property. I presented copies of the settlement agreement, the police report from Brenda's trespassing incident, and the records of the fraudulent code enforcement complaints. The planning commissioners looked through the documents with increasing interest. Brenda stood up, her face red. This is a vindictive personal attack. Mr. Fulton has been hostile to our community since its founding. I've been protective of my property rights, I corrected. There's a significant difference. The Planning Commission tabled the variance application pending further review. It never came up for approval again. Apparently, Brenda's reputation had preceded her, and the documents I'd provided were the final straw. The expansion plans were quietly shelved. Life settled into a new normal after that. The garbage trucks used the proper entrance to Pinewood Heights. My road stayed quiet. Brenda kept her distance, though I'd occasionally see her car slow down as it passed my property, as if she couldn't resist checking to see what I was up to. The money from the settlement sat in my bank account, a reminder that standing up for yourself actually could pay off. I used some of it to repave my entire road with proper asphalt, something I'd been putting off for years. The irony wasn't lost on me that the HOA's trespassing had ultimately paid for the improvement of the very road they'd damaged. I also installed a proper gate at the entrance to my property, the kind with a keypad and automatic sensors. It was probably overkill, but after everything that had happened, I wanted clear boundaries. The gate stayed open during the day while I was home, but closed automatically at night and whenever I left. About a year after the gate was installed, I got a knock on my door. I opened it to find a man in his 30s wearing jeans and a polo shirt. "Mr. Fulton, I'm David Chen. I'm on the Pinewood Heights HOA board. Do you have a few minutes?" I studied him cautiously. "What's this about?" "I wanted to talk to you about the history between you and the HOA. May I come in?" I led him to my kitchen table. David pulled out a folder and opened it carefully. "I want to start by apologizing," he said. "I've been on the board for 6 months now, and I've spent a lot of time reviewing past issues. The way you were treated was completely unacceptable. Brenda Patterson's behavior was unprofessional and, frankly, illegal." "Was?" "She was removed from the board 3 months ago. There were other incidents beyond yours. She'd been using HOA funds inappropriately, making decisions without board approval, and generally creating liability issues for the entire community. Once we started digging, we found a pattern of behavior that couldn't be ignored." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to start fresh. I'm not asking you to forget what happened, but I'm hoping we can establish a better relationship going forward. We're your neighbors, and that should mean something. I appreciate the apology, but I'm not interested in being part of the HOA or giving you access to my road if that's what this is about." David shook his head. "No, nothing like that. Your property is your property. We respect that now. I actually wanted to ask if you'd be willing to serve as a consultant on property rights issues. We're revising our bylaws and establishing new procedures to prevent anything like this from happening again. Your perspective would be valuable." I thought about it, Part of me wanted to tell him to leave and never come back, but a larger part recognized that he was trying to do the right thing and that maybe, just maybe, some good could come from all the conflict. "I'll think about it," I said. "Send me the details in writing." David stood and extended his hand. "Thank you. That's all I can ask." Over the next few months, I did consult with the new HOA board. I reviewed their proposed bylaws and made suggestions about property access, contractor oversight, and resident notification procedures. They implemented most of my recommendations. It was strange working with an organization I'd spent 2 years fighting, but it also felt like closure. Brenda Patterson moved away from Pinewood Heights about 18 months after being removed from the board. I heard through David that she'd been forced to sell her house after some financial issues came to light. Apparently, the inappropriate use of HOA funds had extended to outright theft, and the board had considered pressing charges. They'd ultimately decided against it in exchange for her immediate resignation and restitution. I felt a twinge of something when I heard that news. Not quite satisfaction, not quite sympathy. Maybe just relief that the whole chapter was finally closing. My road stayed quiet. The gate did its job. I kept working from home, enjoying the peace I'd moved out here to find. Every now and then, I'd look at the asphalt driveway, smooth and perfect, and remember those early mornings with the garbage truck rumbling past my window. I'd think about those invoices stacking up, about Rebecca's careful legal strategy, about the satisfaction of finally being heard. The thing about standing up for yourself is that it's rarely easy or quick. It would have been simpler to just let the trucks keep using my road, to accept Brenda's dismissive attitude, to go along to get along. But simple isn't always right. Sometimes you have to draw a line and defend it, even when people tell you you're being unreasonable, even when it costs you time and money and stress. I'd drawn my line, and I'd held it. The garbage trucks had used my private road for 3 years total by the time everything was finally resolved. 3 years of daily trespassing, meticulously documented and invoiced. 3 years that turned into 2 successful lawsuits, over $80,000 in settlements, and the eventual removal of an HOA president who'd thought she was above property law. My uncle would have been proud. These days, when I drive down my road, past the gate and the private property signs that nobody questions anymore, I think about lessons learned. I think about the importance of documentation, of knowing your rights, of finding the right lawyer, and following through even when it's hard. I think about how individuals can stand up to organizations and win if they're patient and methodical. I also think about grace. Working with David and the new HOA board taught me that organizations aren't monolithic. Bad leadership creates bad outcomes, but leadership changes. People who actually care about doing the right thing can turn things around. But mostly, I just enjoy the quiet. My road is mine. It's always been mine. Now everyone knows it, respects it, and pays for it if they don't. That garbage truck that started all this, the bright orange Summit waste management vehicle that rumbled down my road every morning for those early weeks, still services Pinewood Heights. I see it sometimes when I drive past the main entrance. It uses the proper access road now, the paved public entrance that adds exactly 2 minutes to its route. 2 minutes. That's what this whole 3-year saga had been about. A garbage company trying to save 2 minutes per day, an HOA president too arrogant to admit she was wrong, and a property owner who refused to back down. I kept copies of every invoice I'd sent, all 189 of them spanning 3 years. They're in a filing cabinet in my office, a thick stack of paper documenting every single unauthorized trip down my road. Sometimes I flip through them, just to remind myself that keeping records matters, that persistence pays off, that standing up for what's right isn't always immediate, but it is always worthwhile. The last invoice I sent was dated exactly 3 years and 2 days after the first truck appeared on my property. By then, the lawsuits were settled, the payments received, and the trucks long gone from my road. I sent it anyway, more as a symbolic gesture than anything else. It sat unpaid for a few weeks before Summit Waste Management sent a check, probably just to close out their files completely. That final check felt like the real ending. Not the settlement, not the handshake with David, but that last payment acknowledging every single trip they'd taken down my road without permission. Acknowledgement matters. Accountability matters. Justice, even when it's slow and complicated and exhausting, matters. I framed that last check instead of cashing it. It hangs in my office now, a reminder that individuals have power, that property rights mean something, and that sometimes the right response to being taken advantage of is to document everything and invoice accordingly. My road is quiet these days. The only vehicles that use it are mine and the occasional invited guest. The asphalt is smooth, the gate works perfectly, and my property lines are respected. It took 3 years, 2 lawsuits, and more stress than I'd like to remember, but in the end, my private road stayed private. And every morning when I don't hear a garbage truck rumbling past my window, I smile. Silence, it turns out, can be worth quite a lot. In my case, it was worth about $80,000, 3 years of careful documentation, and the satisfaction of proving that doing things the right way, even when it's the hard way, eventually wins. Brenda Patterson thought she could bully me into accepting her illegal use of my property. Summit Waste Management thought they could ignore my cease and desist letters. They both learned that assumption was expensive, very expensive. The funny thing is, if either of them had just approached me professionally at the beginning, we probably could have worked something out. I'm not unreasonable. If the HOA had come to me and said, "Hey, our garbage service would like to use your road. Can we negotiate an easement agreement and maintenance cost sharing?" I probably would have said yes for a reasonable annual fee. But that's not what happened. Instead, they took without asking, ignored my objections, and dismissed my concerns. They turned what could have been a simple negotiation into a 3-year legal battle. They chose the expensive way. I chose the methodical way. And in the end, methodical beats arrogant every single time. The trail camera still monitors the entrance to my road. Old habits die hard. But the footage is boring now, just me coming and going, the occasional deer, the mail truck pulling up to my box by the county road. No orange garbage trucks, no HOA presidents trespassing with surveying equipment, just quiet, peaceful, private property. Exactly as it should be. 3 years of invoicing, 3 years of documentation, 3 years of standing my ground. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Well, maybe I would have installed that gate sooner. But everything else? I did it right. I held the line, I proved my case, and I made sure that everyone involved understood that private property means private property. No exceptions, no excuses. My uncle used to say that your property is your castle, and you have to defend it like a castle, not with violence or aggression, but with vigilance and the law. He was right. The law was on my side from day one. It just took time, patience, and meticulous record-keeping to prove it. Now, when I look out my window in the morning, I see trees, wildlife, and peace. I hear birds instead of diesel engines. I smell fresh air instead of garbage truck exhaust. My road serves its intended purpose, providing access to my property and no one else's. It was a long battle, but it was worth every minute, every invoice, every documentation session, every frustrating phone call and ignored letter. Because in the end, I won. Not just legally, not just financially, but completely. I protected my property, I stood up for my rights, and I made sure that no one, not an HOA president or a waste management company or anyone else, could take advantage of me without consequences. 3 years from first truck to final settlement, 3 years of garbage trucks using my road, and 3 years of me invoicing them for every single trip. It sounds simple when you say it like that, but the reality was complex, frustrating, and sometimes overwhelming. There were moments when I wondered if it was worth the effort, if I should just let it go and move on. But I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I held firm, kept records, and followed through. Because now my road is mine, completely and undisputedly, and I have $80,000 to show for the journey. Not a bad outcome for refusing to be pushed around. The gate at the end of my road closes automatically at dusk every evening. It's a solid, well-built gate that makes a satisfying click when it locks. That click is the sound of boundaries being maintained, of property rights being respected, of lessons learned the hard way by people who thought they could do whatever they wanted. Every evening when I hear that click, I remember why it's there. I remember Brenda Patterson's dismissive attitude, Summit Waste Management's ignored letters, and my uncle's advice about defending your castle. And I smile because my castle is secure, my property is protected, and my private road is finally, truly private. That's the real ending. Not dramatic or flashy, just quiet satisfaction and the knowledge that persistence, documentation, and standing up for yourself eventually pays off. Sometimes it pays off to the tune of $80,000 and a perfectly paved private road. I'd say that's a pretty good return on 3 years of invoicing.